The fact that access to this divine medicine is criminal, and any system that maintains its prohibition from human hands is one that needs to be smashed to bits.
There is nothing more intense and challenging than an Ibogaine or Iboga journey.
Day before I left for my first Ibogaine experience, I was crying on the porch of our house, and my wife's like, "Are you scared?" I'm like, "I'm scared it's not gonna work."
It's like looking at the pool of psychedelics, and there's one part of the pool that's the real deep end that has no lights. And you're like, yeah, I'll go dive in that part.
It all begins with the plant finding you, and I have to endorse the notion that it found me. I was filled with the most overwhelming, powerful love I'd ever felt in my life, and I came out shouting, "Praise you, God," as loudly and as forcefully as I could. And no matter how bad it gets, no matter how scared you are, don't you ever lose faith in the reality of God's love for you. At the heart of trauma and addiction is profound spiritual affliction. And if we can provide a viable opportunity for our brothers and sisters in this life to choose to receive a therapeutic experience that will heal their minds, their bodies, and affirm the realities of their soul, then we had better get about the business of making that available as quickly as humanly possible.
This is one of my favorite podcasts of all time. Brian Hubbard is a man on a mission from God to help people heal with the use of psychedelic medicines, particularly Ibogaine. And he brings here with him today Robert Gallery, 8-year NFL star, who had a profound experience healing and recovering with Ibogaine and other psychedelic medicines. This podcast dives into not only the nuances of the experience of doing these medicines, but the profound impact that it may have as it ripples across culture and changes the paradigms that we have about mental health and about God. Because ultimately, all of these medicines are like tributaries that lead to the vast ocean of the divine. So I hope you guys enjoy this divinely inspired podcast with Brian Hubbard and Robert Gallery. Robert, Brian, great to have you guys here.
It's a joy and a privilege.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. This is a podcast that's really about hope, because there's a lot of people who are in dark places, a lot of people who are really hurting. And, God has blessed this beautiful earth with medicines that can really, really help people in profound ways that we don't understand. I mean, we're used to going to a doctor, getting a pill to mask the symptoms. It doesn't really work. It causes other symptoms. You take another pill, you mask those symptoms, and all of a sudden you're left hollow and empty and disconnected from the heart-centered place that you know yourself to be in the life that you're here to live. And then there's another path, an older path, a traditional path that can be woven in with the modern medical path. And we're starting to see those convergences happen now, thanks to this burgeoning psychedelic renaissance. But fundamentally, it's a return, it's a remembering of older ways of healing the spirit to heal the mind and the body. And it's an incredibly exciting time, and I'm really happy also that the lawmakers are kind of getting wind of this, and these things that they've restricted are actually the things that the people need most. So what an incredible time to be alive and doing our work, to be able to offer a message of there's real hope out there. However hard it is for you right now, there's hope, and you're living proof of that, of that example, right, Robert?
Yeah, I think that's, like you said, it's that there is hope. And we'll, I'm sure, go into it more, but the day before I left for my first Ibogaine experience, I was, crying on the porch of our house, and my wife's like, "Are you scared?" I'm like, "I'm scared it's not going to work."
Yeah.
So it was, coming back, it's the hope, hey, there is hope too, because I'd done everything else, in modern medicine. So
take us through a little bit of that. So, football player, offensive guard, you said, right? And I mean, you're fucking crashing helmets with people your whole life
Right.
to get to that position.
Yeah, I played college football at the University of Iowa. Drafted to the Oakland Raiders, so I played most of my career with the Raiders and then the Seahawks. But yeah, our job as an offensive lineman, it's 70 plays a game of bashing heads, right? And it's every practice, there is no days off with your head. And so from my career coming, it got to the point with surgeries and just the wear of my professional career that there was a point where like I'm done. Like physically I'm done. Like mentally I was to a point that things were going south mentally. And after retirement was when I started noticing all these things. Whether it was forgetting my kids' names or, late at night stumbling with my words. And it was, dreams and all these things, and it's turned to substance abuse because that made the stuff go away, right? Anxiety and all these things that I thought was just part of, losing my identity as a professional football player. But as time went on, I got deeper and deeper with the ways I was coping. And then I started having, suicidal nightmares and then suicidal ideation, and to the point where, I thought I was losing my mind, right? These things were happening. My kids would be laughing and I would just sit in a chair shaking because I thought it was hurting them because that's how much it enraged me. And where my wife was like, it's okay. What's wrong? And I'm like, I'm not hurting them. And she's like, no, you're not. You're sitting in a chair. So I got to the point where I was like, I need help, and finally broke down. Right, as an athlete, an elite athlete. I thought it was just me. Right, everybody else is fine. Everybody else I see out there is fine. Nothing happened to them. This is, what's going on with me. So it happened to come at a time when I did get a brain scan for some workers' comp stuff through the league, and there were some answers. Right, here's a picture of your brain. And this area controls anger. This is some answers for me. So I came out of it, kind of laughing. And my wife was there. She said, "What are you laughing?" She was obviously upset with me. What are you laughing? I'm like, I'm not losing my mind. Like there's something, right? There's an answer. So that kind of started my journey. And that was through, modern medicine.
It's interesting to me, sorry to interrupt, but the idea of losing your mind, it actually, in the actual statement of that, is an I that is losing it, right? Like, so there was this shred of awareness, because if you really lose your mind, the I that's losing the mind is the lost mind. But you knew still, and I think this is an important distinction for anybody out there. If you're thinking, I am losing my mind, well, who is the I? Like, who is the I? Like, who is that soul? That awareness of who you really are. And then, as you said, there was some actual hardware malfunctions, and you knew like, okay, there's an I that has a hardware malfunction, and now I need to fix the hardware and software malfunctions. But like fundamentally, I think that's important to recognize. As long as you retain that I, and my father, he had a tragic story with his own mental struggles that I prefer to mythologize rather than pathologize, because he didn't have the hardware issues. It was really all just software and thoughts and dark forces that had kind of taken him. But he wasn't able to separate the I from the actual state that he was in. And so for anybody else out there as I imagine a lot of people are going to come to this who are really hurting, like, as long as you remember your I, like, who am I really? Then you got hope, and there's ways and there's tools. And then, you can take us to that moment that right before you went to go find these tools to actually fix it.
Right. Yeah. No, it's very, very true in that. So from that point on, I did everything that the doctors told me to do, to like, hey, if you don't do anything, you're probably going to be a statistic, right? Just with the amount of damage you have and everything that's going on.
Yeah. You were headed down the Junior Seau path.
Yeah. So it's, I bought a hyperbaric chamber, all these things that they, recommended I did, and got to a point where, I was 50% better,
Great.
So, which is great, but, being suicidal 50% of the time is still not great. you
Right.
know? So it was
Improvement.
yes, it was improvement, but it's like I'm still struggling. And then that's, you know, when I'd started listening to Marcus Luttrell's Team Never Quit podcast, just the stories resonated with me as an athlete. These guys, oh, they did it. You know, they found help. They did this. They got through these hard times. And that's where I heard Marcus and Amber Capone, and Marcus talked about his journey. And then, so from there on, you know, after that, I called my wife. I was like, you got to listen to this. You know, it was me talking on there, and reached out to Marcus. And he called me the next day, and, you know, long story short, 3 weeks later, I was down in Mexico with a group of veterans. They brought me in with them, and that started my journey with plant medicine.
Wow. And it was ibogaine in particular.
Yes. So I'm a farm boy from Iowa, right? I have
Look at this, Iowa and Kentucky here talking
That's
about
something.
psychedelic
Right.
medicine. We know we're doing something right.
exactly
If
right.
We got Iowa and Kentucky here representing psychedelic medicine.
Right at the heart of it all.
Let's go.
You know, so I had no experience whatsoever with psychedelics, let alone, you know, smoked marijuana a couple times in my life. I am just a
Sure.
farm kid from Iowa. So going and doing that and having that as my first experience was obviously eye-opening, but
To say the least. So going to do ibogaine, I mean, it was the perfect medicine for you, obviously. But it's like looking at the pool of psychedelics, and there's one part of the pool that's the real deep end that has no lights. And you're like, yeah, I'll go dive in that part. I mean, it's of all of the pantheon of psychedelics, which I've been blessed to be a part of the great ceremonies of the world, there is nothing more intense and challenging than an ibogaine or a boga journey.
and that's what everybody says now, like, oh, you just jumped into the deep end. But that's what
you needed.
That's what I needed.
That's what
and
you were
that's
called
what
for.
I
That's
was
what your
called
soul
to.
was telling you to do.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So this brings you into the picture here because really you're also focused, you know, largely on, you know, ibogaine therapy and actually making some fucking big moves.
We're
here.
trying mighty hard.
I know that. I see that, and I respect that immensely.
Thank
What
you.
was it that drew you to this medicine? Obviously, Robert has this deeply personal story, but what was it for you?
You know, as I've listened to folks who recognize the reality of what plant medicine is, which is an opportunity to engage the divine through a restoration process that will affirm our identity as spiritual beings. It all begins with the plant finding you. And I have to endorse the notion that it found me for the first time in 2018. And I'll give you just some background details in terms of childhood. My first memories were of tremendous conflict and chaos between my parents. And I was a very shocked and scared child for the very first years of my life. I was very blessed to have two grandfathers in my life who, if you come from the mountains, Kentucky, Virginia, West Virginia, you call them folks papaw. I had two papaws who were grade school educated coal miners. They had lives of tremendous physical deprivation and hardship. Both of them had worked underground for about 40 years, starting when they were about 16 years old. Neither one of them had a full set of fingers. You could hear my dad's dad breathe from 50 feet away from the combined effects of black lung and residual effects of tuberculosis that he had contracted in a coal camp in 1967, for which he was forcibly committed in a sanatorium for 7 years. Wow. These gentlemen had every reason to be angry and embittered at the world and the lot that it had cast them, but they were also men of tremendous faith. And I look back on their participation in my life, and they were without question the presence of God's love from those first days. They would take a very active role with me when I was little, and before I would go back to my parents, at one point in time, each of those men would put me on their lap, and they would say, "Papa knows that you are scared and frightened. Papa knows you're going through a hard time. But here's what you need to understand. Mama and Papa love you. We pray for you every day. But most importantly, God loves you. And He has a special and unique purpose for your life. And no matter how bad it gets, no matter how scared you are, don't you ever lose faith in the reality of God's love for you." If I had not had that lesson given to me from the time I could first understand language and repeatedly reinforced as I grew into adulthood, if I were alive at all, there is no question but that without that affirmation, I would be living somewhere in a dark hole, wondering what someone who held jobs as I have held was going to do to come and pull me out of it. And we'll just cut right to the heart of it. Over the past 30 years, American society has witnessed the complete and total collapse of a variety of social institutions and their credibility that have as their primary responsibility the maintenance of our cohesion as a country and the administration of government systems that are supposed to serve and protect us. Rather than get that sort of experience, what we have seen is an epidemic of corrupted incompetence within government systems that exploit problems that they are supposed to solve and by monetizing sustained human misery. At the heart of trauma and addiction is profound spiritual affliction. Mm-hmm. And if we can provide a viable opportunity for our brothers and sisters in this life to choose to receive a therapeutic experience that will heal their minds, their bodies, and affirm the realities of their soul, then we had better get about the business of making that available as quickly as humanly possible. That's it.
Amen. Amen. I'm with you 100%. You know, I didn't have the hardships that you guys experienced in the external, but some part of me actually sought these medicines partly because of their challenging aspects and partly because of just this deep drive. I knew that I was blessed. I knew that I was just blessed by my upbringing, by my family. I mean, everyone, and my parents split when I was young, but it was beautiful because my step-parents were also incredible. You know, my father was a SWAT team squad leader. My mother was a Wimbledon semifinalist. My stepmother was like the personal doctor for the Lakers and the nutritional side. My dad was a famous commodities trader, and I was exposed to all of this information. And so I had this deep drive to, all right, I gotta make something special in my life because I've gotten every opportunity, and I gotta pay that forward. You know, like this God's blessing that was given to me. Now, obviously, I didn't believe in God until I did my first medicine journey. I went into my first medicine journey.
Do you mind to say that again?
I went into my first medicine journey at 18 years old. I was an angry atheist, and I'll tell you why I was angry. I went to Italy with my family when I was 15, and we went down, and we were cruising around, and we went to a dungeon of the Inquisition. And in the dungeon of the Inquisition, I saw horrors that still haunt my mind today. 80% of the torture devices had to do with somebody's genitals. And the church was actually, at that time, doing that to people who they called witches or heretics or political rivals or whoever the fuck they wanted, or anybody that their sadistic desires wanted to pull off the street from some poor village somewhere and bring them through this sadistic torture mechanism. So I was like, all right. That was my first exposure because my parents weren't atheists. They were agnostic. They were like, they kind of believed in spirit, but not enough to actually, you know, have it a part of their life. They just lived in like almost like God is nature and it's all around us, which is kind of true, but it wasn't like the deep understanding. They never used the word God. But then that made me an atheist. I was like, oh, well, if people do this in the name of God, then I'm here to tear down religion. Yeah, I'm here to tear it all down. And I was reading Christopher Hitchens' God is Not Great. And I was like, this is my path. I go to do my first medicine journey. And for me, it was MDMA and psilocybin led by a shaman that was, you know, one of the crew from the legendary Psychonaut and Dr. Stan Groff. And so, you know, she guided me through this journey, and I was fucking terrified. I remember I grabbed like a worn river stone from the path, and I was like, as long as I hold this rock, I know I'll exist. But actually, by the time that I was in the experience, I knew that I existed not only beyond this life as the body that was holding the rock, but a soul that spanned the eons of time. And I felt myself become that soul. And then I was like, well, shit, if there's a soul, there's a God, because where else is all of this happening but in God's bosom, like, and so my whole paradigm shifted. And at that point, it sent me on this trajectory that changed my life. And if people ask me, so you believe in God? I go, it's like Carl Jung when they asked him that question, believe? What do you mean? I know.
That's right.
I know. What do you think happens when you die? I don't think I know. I don't know exactly how it is, but I know my soul is going to continue. I know. And then that drops the fear out of the equation, and every subsequent experience just adds more like confidence and faith and trust and love that you can bring into your life. It can't be overstated how important that gnosis of God really is.
Amen.
Yeah.
Going through this, like growing up, I was a Catholic. We went to school, went to church every Sunday. I thought I was religious. I thought I believed in certain things. But as you stated, going through the experience, it took my level to a whole something that I didn't even know existed, right? Because of what the medicine showed me, what it has done for me. It's like you said, it's like now I know, right? There's like, it's almost comical because the experiences you have with these different medicines and what they do for you, there's no question, right? There's no other way to say it than that. There's no question of what exists and why it's here.
Mm-hmm. So take us through your Ibogaine experiences themselves qualitatively, because I've done 2 flood doses, one kind of half flood dose, and many microdoses. So I've been there too, and I can share some stories. But I'm more interested in hearing both of your stories about Ibogaine itself.
Yeah. So my first experience, like I said, I've done 3 experiences, but my first experience was obviously the most profound. But I came into it with all these different things going on, whether it was cognitively slow, and ringing in my ears from all the concussions, the fuzzy vision, there was times I couldn't recall my kids' names, just all these different things going on. And when I got into the experience, and like you said, I grew up 2 parents in Northeast Iowa, great family, 3 brothers and a sister. I grew up in a very loving family. No childhood trauma that a lot of people have. So during my experience, it was, there wasn't trauma being worked out from my childhood or things of that nature. To me, in the experience, it was, to me, as I was going through, it was all these reels and scenes flying towards me. I was, floating in this space, and then all these things that happened in my life were flying by me. And I remember it took me a while to figure out, like, what is this? It was all these lights going by. And then I slowed it down, and there were reels of different things in my life playing as I'd watch them go by. I'm like, oh, whether it was my playing career, whether it was my family, not necessarily trauma. Some of them were great, right? There's things from I remember my playing career that I was like, oh, God, and I'd grab it and I'd throw it at myself, keep that one. And then there was, things I saw as failures. It was a lot of my intention going into it. All these things that I saw were my failures, whether it was from my career as a husband, as a father. So I saw some of those things, and I'd grab that reel and throw it back out into the universe, and it would go away. So for me, it was hours of that, like this defragging of all these things that were in my head all the time.
And so when you threw those failures and you gave them, in a way, what you're saying is you give them back to God, right? Mm-hmm. Throw them back out into the universe. Universe with a capital U is, you can call that God if you like. So you give those back to God so they're not actually playing in there. Did you have this kind of mental recognition that recalibrated those as maybe not failures, or did you just kind of get rid of them? And did you change your perspective on them, or did you just get rid of them?
Some of both. So at first it was like, get rid of them. I don't want to see it. It's gone. And it was this instant relief that, I saw them go away and they were gone. And then, this was for hours for me. Or
Yeah.
the
boga is so long.
Yeah.
The one thing that people got to understand is it's long.
Yeah.
You're in there. Like you're in there. You got time.
Yes.
You got fucking time.
So as they would come, things kept coming through, then those same experiences, as you said, would come back. Right. But I see it in a different view.
Yeah.
So I was like, I remember contemplating, like, I've seen this, or I already played this, but this reel's different, So I saw a different view of what that was. That was a huge failure in my career, but was it really? Like, this is a different view of what I saw as that failure. So there was a little bit of both. Some was just like, I'm done with that. Right? Never saw it again.
Right.
But a lot of it was revisited and gave me a different perspective of, is that really a failure? Or was that part of the journey? Was that part of what you were supposed to do to get to here, to this reel behind it?
Mm-hmm.
So that was just defragging for hours and hours of seeing these things. And then there was loving stuff, right? It was my kids at that point, my wife who I met in college. We've been together since, and like those memories, I'm keeping those, right? And then they would come back around. It was like, what else is in there? It showed, just showed me different views of what I saw, maybe was my love for them. So it was very, very eye-opening to see these things from a different perspective, good or bad.
I've always been a collector since I was a kid. Whether it was sports cards, magic cards, comics, stamps, or coins. And as I've gotten older, I've transitioned to collecting original art. I also believe in precious metals as one of the safest and most stable stores of wealth. The impossibly cool thing about my new company, Metalmark, as part of the Aubrey Marcus Collective, is that it combines both of these things that I love. Fully assayable and recoverable fractional gold notes, paired with impossibly beautiful, cool, and collectible limited edition art. So if for some reason you don't like the art anymore, or the art loses its value, you can always just keep the gold. If any other class of art loses its value, all you are left with is paper, or in the case of NFTs, pixels. And if you are just starting in collecting gold, instead of having to drop $2,700 on a coin like this, you can get in for less than a Benjamin. And then when you came out of that experience, I think when I've come out of big experiences like that, it really brings up the kind of famous passage from the Sufi poet Hafiz, where Hafiz says, "Wherever you are right now, God circled this place on a map for you." Wherever you are right now, God circled this place on a map for you. And this goes for all the listeners. Like, it's true. Like, because we have that choice to make it, okay, this is exactly how it's supposed to be because here I am now. But it still takes an active principle to make that true. It's a prophecy. It's a prophecy that you have to act on to make true, and you were acting on it to make true. But when you start to act on it, you go, fuck, everything's perfect. Like I wouldn't change a thing, and that's the wild and beautiful part about what these journeys can bring.
As I came out of it too, I was so drained. So as time went on, I recalled my journey, but I was so physically and emotionally drained and sick. The gray day was a black day for me. It was, I was down and out, couldn't function. So
what he's talking about is after the Iboga flood, there's what they call like the gray day, which is like a day in between where you're still can't quite sleep so good, but you're kind of recalibrating. You've been through this massive psychic surgery, this intense defrag, virus scans, the whole fucking thing, but it's intense.
It's very,
your heart rate's at 110, for 24 hours, it's like, it's a journey.
It 100% is. And I was so physically sick. for that 8-10 hours that day, I couldn't scrape myself off the floor, that I couldn't think of there wasn't much thought of the actual journey itself. I was like, what did I do to myself?
Right.
Couldn't get off the floor. I was using a walker to get to the restroom because my legs weren't working. But as the night went on, things came back to me, or the suffering went away enough to where I could recall what I'd been through, and then that led into our experience with 5-MeO-DMT the following day, and that's when the light switch came back on. Like, I went into that again, not being who I was, not knowing a thing about 5-MeO-DMT besides what I was told before I went down. And that experience for me brought everything full circle. I talked to God. I was like, oh, wow, this is what took me back to my childhood of sitting in church with my brothers and sisters. The things we were taught and talked about as a family. But it took me to that. This is what it's like in the afterlife. Like, went up there. But then it also helped me deal with some of my issues, and that was if I was, I felt I was a burden on my family and the people around me, and I was, talking to God, and I said, send me to hell. I don't deserve to be here.
Wow.
Right? So I went from this beautiful thing to this rage and anger that I had, and, so I went from that to, you need to talk to her, and then my wife appeared behind him and said the same thing to her. I'm a burden, send me to hell. And then all this ego, this burden was lifted in that experience. And I was like, I belong. And I remember the waking up from that, coming back from that, and I actually walked back out to the group because I was a mess up till this point. I was like, I'm back, bitches.
Yeah.
The first words that came out of my mouth to the guy, and, they said they could see it in my eyes.
Yeah.
So it was that's the full circle for me. And then obviously the days and months afterwards when I really learned what this medicine did, right? My actions of the past, when we got back to San Diego, my wife was there to meet us, and as were some of the other wives, and she tells me even to today, I could see it the instant you walked in, like the darkness and deadness in your eyes was gone. Mm-hmm. And she's like, you guys were all giggling, and like all these things that had not happened for many years, I could see instantly. And then as the days went on, and it was a little traumatic for her in the sense that later she told me, she's like, I was waiting for the shoe to drop. I was waiting for
yeah,
this is great, you're fixed, but when's that shoe going to drop? And she said it never came. Right. So she got, was, because I was like, you're so uptight. Like, where I was the guy, she was always jumping on the grenade before it happened because I would rage, right? Whether those were kids, with people, with whatever it was. And I'm just like in this calm state of seeing why things are happening and not getting triggered. And so the trauma for her, but as time went on, she was able to process like, oh, wow, this is real, what has happened. And so I look back on many, many experiences that it showed me what it had done, whether it was wrestling on the floor with my kids before I went down. Their laughter would trigger me to I'm back in that chair because I wanted to throw them through a window. Like that, they're something that is so loving and should bring so much joy, brought so much anger and rage to me. I had no idea why. I was aware, like, this is not the right feeling. This is a feeling I have, but why is this? In the moment, but it didn't stop the intensity of the rage. So to go from that to afterwards, and I get home 2 days later, and I'm on the floor wrestling and tickling them, and my wife's over there crying. What's wrong with her, right? And I remember it vividly because she's standing there bawling. I'm like, oh, that's weird. Like I'm playing with kids. So instances like that showed me from the journey, right? And that was some of the reels, like the love and joy of what I did have in my life, because I didn't see that because of all the things that are going on and the noise in my head and all these traumatic things. I didn't see that love and joy I had there. So to open that up and to be able to like see that firsthand was so intense, because for so long I had masked it, whether it was drinking or just trying to function because of all the noise that was going on.
Right. When you say I'm back, bitches, that's again, it goes back to that I. Like there was some part of the I, like I think we all know that we're children of God. Like actually deep down encoded in the deep down, whatever it is, we know that we're children of God and we know who that I really is. And when you say I'm back, it means like I'm back in the kingdom of heaven. Like I'm out of this hellish self-hatred, self-condemnation, the belief that you belong in hell. And if you belong in hell, you might as well act hellish, because that becomes the, who's the god of hell? It's the devil, right? So these thoughts, if you believe that's where you belong and that's where you're living, that's what allows you to perpetrate, or at least ideate on all of these different things, killing of the self, hurting of others, all of these things. It's when you don't feel like a welcome child in the universe. Like you don't feel anymore like you're part of the kingdom and like that you belong and that God loves you. And that feeling, to be back is just to be back in the truth of what always was. Satan is the father of lies, as they say, always whispering these delusions. You're always a child of God. You're never not. God never not doesn't love you, and but it's the lies that tell you otherwise. And it's like seeing through the lies. And Iboga has this unbelievable ability to pierce through all of that shit. And then the 5-MeO-DMT is just the lived, felt experience of God's love moving through your body. And then you have to encounter, as you said, the resistance that you have to receiving that type of love. Like you have to really confront your own issues of worth with God's love, because God's love is going to pour right into you. And then your mind is going to say either, oh yeah, baby, like this is it. Thank God. I love you. God, I love you. Thank you, God, or no, it's not for me, and you were able to work through both of those. And that's really, really cool, man. So that's a hell of a story. Brian, tell us some stories.
Well, just listening to y'all, you about got me crying before I even get to talking about mine. And I'm going to do my best to rein in the emotions. While there was difficulty early on, by the time I was in 8th grade, life had stabilized. And I had what was, for the most part, a very conventional upbringing thereafter. And I come to this studio having been in the world of officialdom in the state of Kentucky, having run the state's Social Security, Disability, and Child Support Enforcement programs, ran a law enforcement office called the Office of Medicaid Fraud and Abuse Control that investigated and prosecuted medical providers for fraud on that system, as well as any case of exploitation, neglect, or abuse of a Medicaid beneficiary by a provider. And then finally, because of the reputation that had been established in those prior roles, I came to run Kentucky's Opioid Commission. I was the very first chairman of that organization that had as its job the administration of almost $1 billion in settlement funds secured from opioid manufacturers and distributors for their role in the creation and perpetuation of the opioid epidemic. Within that job, I articulated the aspiration that Kentucky needed to look for its Manhattan Project opportunity to take a small percentage of funds to incubate a therapeutic breakthrough that could help deliver better results for the resolution of opioid dependency. Through that course, I came into contact with the word Ibogaine on July 29 of 2022. And then oftentimes I'll tell folks that this wormhole opened up and shot me into a completely alternative reality that has now landed me in your studio to have this discussion. It's just been an unbelievable odyssey. But as part of that process, I very much believed, in the face of significant criticism from the University of Kentucky and Andy Beshear, who is the current governor of Kentucky, that this project was dangerous and foolish and a waste of public money and should not be done, that I needed to have the courage of my convictions and be willing to practice what I preach and take the medicine that I was advocating for other folks to be able to receive should they so choose to pursue it. I had done a lot of research and had come to understand that there were 2 clinics that operate in Mexico that are able to handle, relatively speaking, a respectable amount of volume. There is the Ambio Clinic south of Tijuana that has been featured in the study published by the journal Nature Medicine back in January of 2024. And then there is a clinic called Beyond, and that is BEOND, out in Cancun. In November of 23, my wife and I, who is here with us in the studio, Jo Alice, traveled to Ambio. We had been invited by both clinics, and I wanted to experience both in order to be able to vouch for their safety as well as the result that was produced. And while I didn't have any substance issues like most folks, I certainly came with some baggage. And for me, in particular, when we went down for the first experience in November of 23, there were some contextual circumstances that plucked at what has probably been the central emotional affliction I have carried since childhood, and that is just profound anxiety. I can't remember a day that my stomach did not hurt. I cannot remember a night that I did not toss and turn. I cannot remember a day that I had not just picked up a cross of perseverating anxiety and worry and carried it with me every single day. It's just who I've been. Leading up to the experience in November of 2023, we went down on the Sunday following Thanksgiving, and this would have been November, I believe, the 28th. 2 things occurred. Number one, there had been a general election in Kentucky where the Attorney General who had appointed me and had blessed me to pursue the Ibogaine Project was leaving office. His replacement had been elected, and during the campaign, his replacement had said that he was open to the suggestion of Ibogaine, open to the Commission's exploration of creating a public-private partnership to get it through the FDA, but he was noncommittal. After he was formally elected, I sent a personal message of congratulations with a request that he meet with me to discuss all of just the fabulous developmental energy that had gathered around this project, commitments from high-level philanthropists just to help support the state through this, as well as the commitments of drug developers to anchor all research and development of Ibogaine's advanced neurotherapeutic applications in, of all places, the state of Kentucky. It was a fabulous opportunity that was coming together. And I said, hey, would you give me an opportunity to come meet with you? I would love to discuss the promise this holds, not just for the state, but the country broadly. And the response I got was, the transition team wishes to let the process play out, and essentially they'll be in touch. So the fate of the Ibogaine Project, into which I had poured my entire self, and everything that I had built by reputation was hanging in the balance, and its future was indefinite. I have 2 much younger sisters through our common mother and through her late husband. We have all, as siblings, had a journey together through issues that have impacted my mother that are tied to mental health and substance use. Her husband loved her mightily, valiantly, and futilely. And we were to leave the Sunday following Thanksgiving. This gentleman had treated his trauma over the course of years with a significant amount of sugar, had developed diabetes, and was in end-stage renal failure at the time that he moved to Kentucky to be close to my sisters and I in 2022. So on Friday before Ibogaine departure on Sunday, I get a text message from one of my sisters that says, Dad has only minutes to live. And we're on the way to the hospital. I was in the movie with my wife and our children. I took them to the house. The hospital was 10 minutes away. As I was pulling in the garage, I got a text message from my younger sister. She's 17 years younger than me. My other one is 19 years younger than me. It said, Dad just died. I walked into the room, and he was on his deathbed in his death state. And I looked at my sisters, who have had a tremendous trauma journey into their adulthood. And I looked at my mother, and for 2.5 hours I sat with them while the reality of it all sunk in. And it was a very visceral, emotional experience. So he was to be buried the following Sunday, and we would be back from Mexico at that time. So when we prepared to receive Ibogaine on Tuesday evening, we were asked to set our intention. And what I asked was that the medicine, if it would do so, please take the cross of anxiety and everything that flows from it by way of fear and anger and resentment and hatred off of me. Please, please take it off of me. So I received the medicine, and at the initial stages, there were these little sci-fi images. There was a little pink flying saucer that came up to my nose and flew away. There was a four-cornered canopy that I can only describe as a celestial canopy. It was like the night sky with stars that was draped over, and what looked like hummingbirds flew underneath the canopy and started to like vacuum the corners with their beaks. And I'm watching this, and I'm bemused and entertained. And as I'm kind of getting into it, it's as if somebody pulled the plug on a television and it just went away. And what I can only describe as a full color fade in came my sister's father on his deathbed in full color, complete detail as I sat at the foot of that bed and looked upon him for the 2 hours that I was in that room. Eyes open, mouth open, the whole 9 yards. And I looked at him. I thought about the tragedy of his life, the ruin in which he died, certain parallels between him and me. And I thought, is this all there is to live and to suffer and die? Is this it? And when I thought that this was all that there was, I began to be filled with the most terrifying existential fear I had ever felt in my life. And just when I thought I was going to explode from the terror of the end, I was just shot into a dark void into which I was suspended in perfect darkness. I could see nothing around me. And in words that were not audible, but were telepathic, these words came into my head, and they were, "Be still and know that I am God." And I was held there for at least 10 hours in that perfectly dark suspension with those words in my mind. And as long as I was there, I was at complete and total peace. The next day, as you know, which is the gray day, I came out of it and I thought, man, what in the world was that all about? And I remember looking at my wife. She came over to me, and she had gone through an experience which was just independently beautiful. I looked at her, and she was smiling, and I could just tell that whatever had happened with her was an answered prayer for me, for her. She had had her own mental health struggles that had had her on SSRIs for 21 years, and I am proud to say that the last one she took was November 23rd, 2023, and she's been off ever since. But through the gray day, I looked at her and I said, I've made a terrible mistake. I can't make any sense of any of this. I don't understand it. This has just been, I don't get it. And then the following day was 5-MeO-DMT. And I have made this analogy that if Ibogaine put magma in the chamber, 5-MeO-DMT blew the top off the mountain. When I received that medicine, it was a staged process, and you're going to know exactly what I'm talking about. The first was the complete and total life review, everything, what it was intended to be, what it was intended to teach and accomplish, the self-review, everything, the good, the mediocre, and the awful, all at once. Perfect understanding of self, strengths and deficiencies all, followed by what I can only describe as feeling the full weight of eternal time crush my individual identity out of existence and show me what complete and total trivial nothing I am in the scheme of this universe. And when that extinction was complete, I was filled with the most overwhelming, powerful love I had ever felt in my life. I went into it crying and screaming as hard and as loudly as I am physiologically capable of screaming and crying. And I came out shouting, "Praise you, God," as loudly and as forcefully as I could. It was the most powerful worship experience I have ever had in my life. The fact that access to this divine medicine is criminal, and any system that maintains its prohibition from human hands is one that needs to be smashed to bits.
Yes.
And I will do everything that I can to contribute to that.
That's not a question. If anybody listened to that and has a question as to whether you are committed, they have to do some self-review, because the commitment that you're showing is this is so in the word enthusiasm, and so it comes from awakening the God within. En, theo, thus. So theo is God. Enthusiasm is like the active principle of God moving through you. And when you speak, you feel God moving through you, and you carry that authority of God. And good luck those standing in the way of God's will, and an empowered individual who's carrying the God that moves in them, as them, through them, and beyond them. You form as like one unit. You're like the finger, like a finger of God's infinite hands, and the way that you move and what you point to, I mean, you're going to get it done. Like, I know you're going to get it done, and God's going to be there with you because God wants it to get done, and God needs you to help him get it done.
And what a fabulous blessing for a mediocrity like me to be given some gifts and abilities to move for his glory, because you've nailed it. This is all about God. This is a spiritual conflict between the human beings who aspire to be God and all of us who recognize that we are of God.
Yeah.
And the day of human being God over human must end immediately.
Mm-hmm. And what you're talking about is the difference between the way that hell operates. So the way that hell operates, which is any power system that's locked in the illusion of separation, it's just a struggle to see who can become Thanos, who can become the most powerful demon in hell.
That's right.
And doesn't matter what you do to anybody else, you'll kill them, you'll double cross them, or you'll use them as long as they're useful, you'll discard them when they're no longer useful if they become rivalrous, you cut them out at the knees. You're on this game of power to be there will be only one, and that one will have absolute power. But that one is never God. That's why Thanos was wrong. Thanos said we have to do this for the cosmos to survive. But Thanos was pretending that Thanos was God, but Thanos was not God. Thanos had just made his way through that system and that distorted mind frame that the devil had whispered in his ear, "Oh, just get the most power and you'll know what to do." And he blinks people out of existence. But he's not bowing. All of us need to bow, no matter how powerful we are, no matter if we're the commander-in-chief of this country or whatever country, we still have to bend the knee to God and say, "God, what do you want from me today?" And everybody, and that's the difference. It's not that there aren't hierarchies even in our government or in the military or even on a football team. There's captains, there's coaches, there's fucking owners, there's a whole structure. It's important. We need to operate that way. But nonetheless, everybody needs to know where to bend the knee, and everybody, regardless, has to bend the knee to God if you're going to play in the kingdom rather than play in hell.
Beautifully said, sir.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, these are structural elements of the cosmos that I think when you do the medicine, so this wisdom, yes, I've studied with a lot of the masters, but so much of this wisdom is just, it's from the medicine itself. 25 fucking years of God speaking through the plants and through the prism of these plants and the helper guides and angels and spirits and spirit beings and the hummingbirds. Like, and I'll give you a little piece of psychonaut advice, right? Because you're young in your journey, I'm old in my journey, and you're filled with that enthusiasm. And I fucking love it because I've felt that myself. Here's some advice. Okay, so if you see a pink spaceship in your vision, you stop for a second and go, hey, and you make contact. Like you actually converse with it. Like imagine like a person wearing a pink spaceship hat came in, you'd be like, hey, what's up? Like, what are you here to teach me? And the hummingbird, same. So there's an active pride, and your journey was perfect. And there's little curious bits that you can extract that add little extra wisdom. Same for you, Robert. This goes for anybody on the psychonautic path. The curiosity and interactivity can open up some really cool things, because sometimes they're there to just kind of check in on you. But if you open the door with conversation and curiosity and love and without fear and like, hey, do you have anything to teach me? You know, pink spaceship guy, and you might get some really cool wisdom. Or, hey, hummingbirds, like, what are you up there doing? It seems like you're doing something cool. And they may respond, they may not. You don't have total control. They're autonomous agents, so they're doing what they're doing. But a lot of times you can get, in the deeper I've gone in the journeys, that curiosity will open up little pearls, and then so in this story, in the next story, you might be like, and then I talked to Aubrey and he said to talk to these alien beings, and this alien came out and he told me this, and it just adds this kind of color and beauty to the whole experience. But the heart of the experience, the real reason why, is not for that stuff, even though that stuff's cool. I mean, I remember like an eagle flew in one of my ayahuasca visions, and I said, eagle, do you have anything to teach me? And the eagle said, I do, actually. I'm going to teach you the secret of my sight. And I was imagining in my mind, well, what's the secret of the eagle's sight? Well, he sees from 10,000 feet above. He can see a large perspective. He's got good vision. He's like, no. Secret of my sight is I see through everyone else's eyes. And I was like, oh, damn, that's right. That's how you really see. It's like, I see as Robert, or I see as Brian. And then I see the whole world in a more omniperspectival way. It's just more, which allows me to actually act in accordance with God's will. Because like the more eyes that I see through. So there's like little bits that you can pick up on your journeys that'll just help you and help you share wisdom and help you be these kind of messengers of God's word with full humility and full audacity. They call that in the lineage of Solomon that I studied, tekufot, which is maximum humility and maximum audacity at the same time. Like knowing that, as you said, like I am just a drop in the ocean. And also, as Rumi said, I'm the ocean in a drop, baby. I'm the ocean in a drop too. So that's the maximum humility. I'm just a drop in the ocean. Like, I'm just a grain of sand on an infinite beach. And I'm the whole motherfucking beach, and you get both of those. And then that allows you to move with the right tekufot, that sacred audacity and humility at the same time.
I'm going to have you spell that word out for me. I think I might have just
sure.
come up with my new tattoo.
Tekufot. Yeah, ancient Aramaic word.
I think what you said about the curiosity, and I was lucky enough the therapist I worked with before my first experience told me exactly that. Be curious, told me all these things. Like, hey, you're going to see these things that aren't going to make sense. Don't just say, that's weird that I saw it. Like, be curious. So throughout that experience it was those lights, right? It's stars. It's these bright light rays going by me. And until I went back to what you said, the curiosity, like, what really is that like?
Right.
Like, what are you doing? Right. Then that's when it slowed down and I saw these reels, right? Saw these things. And the farther I go on my medicine journey, it's always like, ask questions, right? It's there for a reason. I'm always be curious. I remember that in the back of my head, just be curious, whether it's a dream, whether it's something in my daily life or when I'm in an experience.
And what's interesting is we live in a world where we see someone powerful or important, and we imagine, I don't want to go up and talk to them and ask them a question. They're probably busy, and we actually can kind of think that we're taking up somebody's time. But if anybody's in a good mood, they're going to want to talk to you, right? Like you both seem like, and particularly you, Brian, like you seem like someone, if you're sitting around somewhere and there's people around, you're probably talking to them, right?
Oh,
I
love people.
You're probably enjoying it. You know what I mean? Because you're in a good mood, you're enjoying it. Now, imagine that you're in a good mood all the time and there is no time. So what do you want to do? Of course you want to talk to people. Of course you want to talk to people. So all the angels, all the ascended masters, Yeshua, God, they want to talk to you. They want to talk to you, and they'll be there and they'll listen to you the whole time. Let me tell you a story that's, I think, a really beautiful story. There's a story that was told by my teacher, Rebbe Gaffney. And so in the rabbinic traditions, when the rabbi goes into prayer, everybody goes into prayer during synagogue, and the rabbi has to pray the longest because he's the rabbi, right? You got to earn your street cred as a rabbi. You got to be the one who prays the longest. It's like if you're Wim Hof, you stay in the cold plunge the longest out of anybody because you're fucking Wim Hof, right? Rabbi's got to earn his stripes. But there was this butcher. There's this butcher in the village, and the butcher would always pray longer than the rabbi. No matter how long the rabbi prayed, the butcher was praying longer. So finally, the rabbi comes up to this butcher and is like, butcher, and in Yiddish, like, what the fuck, man? You know, like, why are you trying to show me up? You know, is this some game you're playing to show how pious you are? And the butcher says, no, Rabbi, let me tell you. People come into my shop and they order some lamb chops. I try to talk to them, but they don't have time for me. They're too busy. I walk down the street. I try to talk to people and say hi, but they have things to do. They're too busy. And even you, Rabbi, I see you in the street and I try to talk to you and you're too busy for me. But when I'm in prayer and I'm talking to God, God says, I'm here as long as you want. Tell me more. Like, I'm here as long as you want. And that's something that we can get from God that we can't get from any person. Is that God's there any moment, no matter, you want to drop into prayer right now and you want to finish in October, great. God's going to be there.
This is like the best Sunday school lesson that I've had times 1,000.
Yeah.
It's fabulous.
It's because it's true. It's true. And like when we understand that about God and the angels, it's like, I remember the first time I encountered God was on, like, you know, again, I had the experience of my soul, but the first time God and this kind of God feeling came in, I was like shocked. I was doing ayahuasca and I was shocked. I was like, oh my God, here I am with God. Like, this is the moment they've talked about. Like, and I was like, and I felt nervous. I was like, what do I do? This is my time. I wasn't ready for this. I didn't write it out of my intentions. If I encounter God, I will ask this. Or I was like, I'm here with God. And I go, God, how do you have the time? And I just felt God just kind of laugh and just smile. Like, and I was like, oh yeah, duh, you are time. Like, oh. Like, idiot. Okay. And then I came up with a good question. I said, God, what would you tell me to really help me out in my life? You know, what would you tell me, God? And God just says, have more faith, my son. Have more faith. And I was just like, fuck. That's it, huh? Because I'm always worrying about some outcome that I don't think is going to work out. I'm always thinking about all the million ways that this thing can go to shit, you know, and oh, I said this thing, so my relationship's going to fall apart. I did this thing and all the business is going to collapse. I'm always, and yeah, it's fine as like the executive mind to be aware of the dangers out there, but have more faith. That's my struggle. It's like a struggle of like, can I maintain the faith that I know is real, that I know God's real, but can I actively maintain it on a daily basis? And I'm still in that prayer, but the pathway is clear. It's just like more prayer, more faith, more prayer, more faith.
The way that you have encapsulated the entire dynamic is fabulous. And if I didn't know and done a little research on you, I would know you are fully experienced and someone, this is just a fabulous conversation.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
I mean, I love talking about this more than anything else. And now, so what's going on? I mean, you guys are probably aware there's things happening. I mean, there was just a big Texas legislation
Yes, sir.
thing that's happening. Like this is happening.
Yes, it is.
That's the great part about it, right? We all started our journey at a different time, but obviously it was life-saving for me. It was transformative. It was all these things. And then through vets, they did the study with Stanford, right? So now we have data showing what this is actually, what this medicine is doing to your brain on top of all these other things we talk about, right? So that's where I was introduced to Brian through the Texas Ibogaine Initiative, and they asked me to be a part of, what they are all trying to do to show what this medicine truly does. It's not all this stuff that people thought from the past, right? These medicines. So my motivation in all of this is to, because of the introduction I had to all the veteran groups, that's who, Mark's Neighbor Capone, I credit them. They saved my life. Yes, I was a quote unquote civilian that went through their program. But what they introduced to me, I've started a foundation called Athletes for Care to introduce to my community, because there's so many guys that I know that played, whatever sport, but mainly football, that are suffering, right? And don't know all these things that are going on because of the repeated head trauma we had for years and years and years, right? On top of all the substance abuse and all these other things that come along with it. So between Brian and Governor Perry and the group working on the Texas Ibogaine Initiative, I'm just here to serve them and bring another avenue of people, right? Because the veterans are greatly affected by this and have been at the forefront of actually accepting this medicine as a elite group of people, right? These veterans who are now my closest friends, right? I've cried with, we've sat, like, these people have, if they can do it, why can't the rest of us we think we're a superior elite at what we did. But I see this group that has done this medicine, has the changes it has brought in them, and I've become part of that community.
And yes, we're all equal. We're all children of God. Yes. And there's some of us who are built to be the shepherds. And I think a lot of these operators and a lot of these people, they have that heroic tendency. Like, you don't sign up to be an operator or a first responder unless God is actually moving through you. Because why the fuck else would you do it? I mean, maybe you think it's some ego thing and you played a lot of video games, but not really. It's for realsies. Like, it's for realsies. You're like willing to risk your life for your company, for your country. Like, you're actually willing to sacrifice yourself for the good of the whole. That's God. That's God energy moving through you, right? Like, that's so fundamentally, that's shepherd energy that's moving through. So while it does absolutely need to be democratized and all the children of God are equal in God's eyes and beautiful, and in this world, those people who can lead and be empowered, like, I'm also simultaneously glad while the resources are limited, we got a handful of clinics doing this type of work. And obviously there's different types of medicines that are now opening up, and there's lots of opportunities, but particularly with Ibogaine and the 5-MeO combination, which I think is incredibly powerful. Also just want to, allow people to know, in my experience with the medicine, when you have a trajectory that then God knows your trajectory, and the medicines are under the care and guidance of God as well. Like, the whole thing is wrapped and enveloped in the God omniscient gnosis of what's happening. So Ibogaine knowing that 5-MeO is coming is a different experience than Ibogaine not knowing that 5-MeO is coming, because Ibogaine can leave things unresolved knowing that the 5-MeO will take care of it. Same if you do a series of 3 ayahuasca sits. Do never judge what ayahuasca is teaching you after the second of 3, because ayahuasca knows it has 3. So it will, like a good storyteller, take you on a story arc. That's exactly what you need to know. And I think that stack and that combination is, just one of the beautiful sequences of an initiatic path of transformation. But I'm curious, how is like the Texas Ibogaine Initiative, how are they feeling about like this 5-MeO-DMT as a part of this protocol? That's probably a little bit much for them, I would imagine, on the lawmaker side.
We are still very much in the midst of introducing and educating lawmakers down in Austin as to what Ibogaine is.
Yeah.
And while they will likely come into incidental contact with knowledge of 5-MeO-DMT as they read independently, the very first goal is to be able to...
I think that's obviously the path, right?
Yes, sir.
Because it's too much. It's overwhelming to try and get them. And we got a secret ally now in the government. My good friend Bobby Kennedy is out there. We got a secret ally in the government that could make things move a little faster, hopefully, in these next 4 years as as secretary of the HHS.
What a tremendous servant to have arrive on the scene at just the right time to open up the lane to put every bit of this on turbo boost.
Seriously. I mean, and talk about someone who the Spirit of God moves through him. Like, I've never been more inspired by a man in my life. Like just being with him and, spending Christmas with him the last 2 years and being in his family home and going through workouts and other experiences with him. It's like, he's the real deal. He's the real deal. Like, God moving through him, like praying every day, like, how can I be of service? Real deal. And erudite and smart and articulate, understands how to maneuver in this world. Unbelievable courage. I mean, we got some real allies. Like, it felt like the darkness was and the dark forces, because also, in my experience, God is as real as they come, and there's these darker forces. I call these forces anti-you just to make it less biblical, but these forces of resistance. Phil Stutz calls it part X. Stephen Pressfield, the great writer, calls it resistance. There's names for it. Obviously, the Bible calls it Satan. You can call it the devil. You can call it all these different names. There's names for it in all the traditions. The Lakota have their own names for it. We know that there's some other force that's trying to corrupt and take our minds down a different path. And we have to be mindful that this is a part of the landscape we're in. And it felt like the dark forces somewhere around, the pandemic era started to make a real push. But the darkness in the end always serves the light, because what happens when you push up against the lion, enough, eventually the lion comes out. Eventually the lion comes out. And so all the darkness that you experienced, Robert, it was like, they pushed up against the eye that was a lion or a dragon. It just pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed until you said, fuck it. I don't fucking care. I'm either going to be a lion, I'm going to be a dragon, or I'm going to fucking die. I don't care anymore. And then you chose to become who you are. And like, that's what's happened, I felt like, with the world. It like pushed up against all of us just enough that enough of us stood up and said, okie dokie, let's go. And I see that and I feel that, and it fills me with great hope. I feel like the people who are like, I don't know, there's a lot of people who are still pessimistic and worried. I'm like, like, we took a massive assault from the dark forces. They were pressing their fucking boots on our throat, and we woke up. And like, enough of us woke up, and like, we still got to stay in the fray, but we did it. Like, we withstood that massive attack on all dimensions. I really believe that. And there may be others. I'm not declaring victory like George H.W. and he's like, we just won Iraq. And then they had to fight for another 20 fucking years. But like, ultimately, we're in a really good spot. And I'm like really enthusiastic and excited about where we are.
You mentioned talking about pushing up against the lion. The Texas Ibogaine Initiative is the Lions' response to the efforts to kill this mission in Kentucky in December of 2023. The fact that we're in this studio having a discussion on just the other side of a full day in the Texas legislature, where we had over 24 Special Forces veterans walking in, meeting with legislative leaders who are almost universally receiving the opportunity for Texas to put $50 million toward a public-private partnership that will get ibogaine through the FDA with enthusiasm. It is answered prayer. Answered prayer said for months in the aftermath of Kentucky that this project be rescued and given viability in soil in which it could grow. And now I have great hope that what we are going to see play out over the next 2 months is a significant and exponential expansion of this opportunity. Because if we win in Texas, if God will enable us to win in Texas, there will be multiple states between the end of 2025 and the end of 2027 that join underneath its banner. Amen. To genuinely Manhattan Project platform ibogaine so that we can hasten the day that it is fully integrated into the U.S. healthcare system as a therapeutic choice, which is exactly where it needs to be.
Yeah, I mean, the moment that it opens up anywhere, it's going to open up everywhere. Like the moment that Colorado legalized cannabis, everybody's looking at Colorado. What's going to happen? Colorado's like, we're doing pretty good, y'all. Like traffic accidents are down, revenue's up, people are happy. And all of a sudden, all the other states are like, yeah, I think I'm into that. And where there's still some states that are figuring it out, and cannabis has its challenges, of course. All of these medicines can be, well, it's difficult to like abuse ayahuasca because it's just so uncomfortable and unpleasant. But nonetheless, I still hold that all of these medicines can be used for the wrong purposes, and they're powerful tools, and you have to be mindful, and they're not a panacea, and you have to be aware, and you have to be with the right people who can guide you. You have to be with the right medicine. You have to be in the right setting. You have to know that you're actually personally called. It's a deeply personal choice. All of those caveats aside, as soon as one domino falls, if this happens in Texas, everybody's going to be looking over. And then it's not going to be 12 Special Forces people. It's going to be 1,000. And then it's going to be 20,000. And then all of a sudden, everybody else is going to be like, well, we're just going to move to Texas then. And Texas is just going to be the fucking land of healed, empowered, badass motherfuckers until other states are like, we need some of them back. So let's legalize in our state just to compete, you know?
I think as you said, the pieces are being put in place to bring awareness. And that's why I felt called, because I'm very private, right? My story, my journey started in 2021 with the medicine. And since then, I want to share with, guys that I see suffering, guys in, different sports, because it's not just Special Forces guys. It's the entire world could use this. Absolutely. For the right reason. And so these places are being put in place, and these calls have been made. Like, who am I, right? That's some of the ego or self-worth thing, but who am I that they're calling me to ask this? But I've been introduced to people to have a platform to share and to, have some of my ex-teammates reach out and be able to openly share that story with them. And like, oh, this is so empowering. And all these things, just thing after thing keeps getting stacked around us, these people, these events, to have this make a huge difference for every community, right? Not just my community, not just the military community. As you said, it's people will see the true healing of what this medicine does for guys like me, for guys like you, right? It's not, you don't have to be a special ops guy to have trauma, to have absolutely. Brain damage, to have, you don't just have to be an athlete just because I bashed my head in for 20 years, right? And that's what the guys I talk to about it is, you may not be at the level I'm at, but here's the healing, here's all of the stuff behind it that, if you feel the calling, this is for you too. And then that opens up, as you said, with guys I've had conversations with, the trauma that is the true root of what this is coming up also, right? So that's trauma they had as a kid or these things that have happened. I'm like, well, we all deal with these external things, the damage from playing, from service, from whatever it was. But the true root is this trauma that we've just decided not to deal with. And now.
And really fundamentally, it's separation from God. And this idea just occurred to me now in this conversation. Like, take the stories of your papaws. They had, as you said, every possible reason to be in all kinds of, have all kinds of mental health issues. And we're in a, quote, mental health epidemic. Now, what held them together, they didn't even have all their fingers. Like that, your story is really powerful. But what they had was a faith and gnosis in God. Mm-hmm. And they had no mental health issues. They had plenty of issues, but no mental health issues. And it almost occurs to me that if we could get classified as a disease condition, a dis-ease condition, which really is the lack of gnosis in God, that is treatable by these entheogens. So it's similar to enthusiasm. Entheogen is awakening the God within. I mean, if you studied, and I think there's studies with this in addiction, those who believe in God have like a vastly, higher recovery rate. That's what drove Robert F. Kennedy Jr. into, his own path of faith with God, is because he actually saw the scientific literature that showed that people that believe in God and know God recover from addiction at a much higher level. But you could probably put that out to every different mental health disorder. Like those people who truly, like your papas, know God, all of the other stuff falls away. The anxiety starts to fall away. The depression starts to fall away. The obsessive compulsion starts to fall away. Not entirely. I'm sure there's plenty of people who know and believe God who still have plenty of problems, but it is fundamentally a treatable condition. Actually, if we get over our scientific materialist reductionism that's tried to declare, like Nietzsche said, that God is dead, pointing to this secular materialism that was sweeping across the country that's led to this post-modernity where we can't even decide what a woman or a man is anymore because we're all so confused about the nature of God and reality. And yes, it's beautiful that people can express their genders however they want to do. Go for it. Have a fucking ball. But nonetheless, God is. And there's actual natural law and there's an existence that is not in question. It's not a story. It's not a figment of our imagination. It's not something we create to make us feel good at night. Do some fucking buffo and tell me that again, Yuval Harari. I fucking dare you. I fucking dare you. Like, tell me life has no meaning after you go through this journey and you do a boga and then you do 5-MeO. Tell me. Tell me that. Like, you won't. I promise.
The forfeiture of competence and credibility by institutional America, government, corporate America, organized religion America, has left a gaping void in which at least half of the people in our society under the age of 50 who have never felt their soul are left to wander into whatever dark corner they can find satiation of their pain and isolation. There is not a single institutional actor within modern American society that has the credibility or the trust of the alienated masses to be re-engaged on the most fundamental nature of the human being, and that is their spiritual nature. If we are going to save this country over the next 50 to 75 years, I agree with Rick Doblin 100%. There must be a shift in social consciousness that is precipitated by the way in which plant medicine can spiritualize the human being. If we do not open up avenues of broad-based access to allow our brothers and sisters who have never felt their souls to understand the reality of that soul, we are doomed. And it will be a damnation of our own humanity to deny them knowledge of who they are within the sphere of God's almighty love. Those are the stakes.
Yes. Yes. And in that state where you're seeking that constant craving and satiation of these temporary fixes, that's the realm. That's the realm where the devil starts to whisper and the devil starts to enter in and corrupt the psyche. But, as I was in a sweat lodge with Chief Bear Cross and one of his brothers they call Care Bear, a really loving guy, and he was taught from really young, and on the Native American reservations, they really struggle with addiction because of the collective trauma that they experience. I mean, they were out there living their fucking best lives, crying their praise to Great Spirit in their songs and dancing their dances and living their life. And all of a sudden, other people came in and were like, no, we want this place. You can, and eventually killed them. And they were fighting and obviously crazy shit that went on. But eventually they got massacred and moved into these tiny little, basically prison camps that they call reservations. And so from that collective trauma, then there's a lot of people who have lost the old connection in the old way because that didn't save them, right? Like they were there with God, and this is part of the challenge, like that. So they're like, well, that shit didn't work. Look where we are now. We're in this impoverished, and then they seek these, addictive remedies for that instead of just doubling down. Like, no, let's get back. And many of them are getting back to the old ways and their own ways of prayer and connection with God. The reason I brought this up was Care Bear said something that was really powerful for them. Great Spirit Wakan is, and also their chanupa, their pipe is like their connection. So like the samurai's connection to the chi, the life force, which is their, Eastern, understanding of God and the life force that moves through all of us. That was their sword, right? So the samurai had their sword, but for the Lakota, they have their chanupa, their sacred pipe that they earn through their Sundance rituals. They earn that through intense sacrifice, 4 days, no food and water, sweat lodges, in the morning and in the evening, still no food and water, and then piercing to a tree and then dancing in prayer and service to God and love for all of humanity, and then offering their flesh in this ecstatic process. And then they earn the right to carry that. So that's a symbol to them of their commitment to God and the beauty way, as they call it. And what Care Bear said was, like the elders always told me, like, fix your eye on the chanupa, fix your eye on Wakan, like fix your eye on Great Spirit. And if you ever turn your eye away, which in my lineage, the Kabbalist lineage, the lineage of Solomon, they call it Sitra Akra, which is the turning of the face from God. Like the moment you turn your face from God, then the devil's whispering in that ear that you turn. But if you're eye to eye with God, like you are, like when I'm looking at you, it's like, yeah, like face to face. It's going to call that panima panim, face to face, instead of, Sitra Akra, which is turning the face. When you turn the face, then all of these different things start to whisper. And I think we're seeing the collective ramifications of people who have turned the face and had their face turned.
Had that face turned.
Had that face fucking
Yes, sir.
turned. And there's some accountability.
Yes,
like
there
this
is.
is a time of reckoning.
That's right.
Like this is really a time of reckoning where all of those forces that have been intentionally turning people's face for their own greed and their own money and their own probably lack of faith, like that's all coming to an end.
The fact that the available therapeutic protocols for any sort of mental health condition achieve two functions and will pair mental health with pain. The fact that the primary responses given pharmacologically to emotional and physical pain are those things that anesthetize the soul and slowly euthanize the body is of no accident. The way in which government systems have parlayed methodologies to produce a compliant and accepting population by engineering things like an opioid epidemic, which was absolutely engineered, is not accidental. You cannot subjugate other human beings if they are aware of their divinity, and denying them the opportunity to have that knowledge is a keystone foundational strategy to assure man subjugates man.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely, brother. Absolutely. I'm going to shift subjects just slightly because I'm highly curious. after you've done this series of medicine work, have you gotten another brain scan to see actually how your brain has responded? Because there's lots of great research about the neurogenesis of these psychedelic medicines. And I'm curious, because I haven't talked to anyone who's had that level of visible CTE and then seen if you've been able to kind of measure a change or a delta in that.
The answer is yes and no. So the original scan I got was a SPECT scan. And I'm learning as this has gone on, the study through Stanford, not to discredit the scan I had, it still definitely shows the damage I had when I originally had it. I mean, it's very visible. The measurement that Stanford has been using is an fMRI, where they really are able to go deep, deeper than a SPECT scan would, and really have these measurables, whether it's white brain matter, whether it's all these things are way above my pay scale.
Yeah.
So I have done a follow-up scan, and there was some difference, but not to the extent that like largely measurable. Now there is, because of this, and I've dug deep into it, because same thing, I'm like, all these things have changed. I know I've healed. And I didn't do a second scan for a long time because I was like, I don't care. Like, I don't care what the scan says. But there's also, they're finding through that sort of scan from the multiple neurologists I've talked to, that they're still trying to figure it out also, because they have noticed in guys like myself that have done psychedelics that there's some results that don't necessarily make sense. Like, all these things you've healed, you've done this, but in their sort of scan, not always showing the improvement that they think there has been. Whereas the fMRI goes deeper into more depth of the brain. And so it was one of those that I did get a rescan. And then, the explanation is from multiple people is that, yes, it's, you're better, if it's done things, but we're still trying to find the answers.
Yeah. So it's like what they're trying to look at.
Right. And it can be as much as, depression, all the damage I have is huge inflammation, right? Was this huge inflammation. So showing areas on my scan that are dead, have no inflammation, but then you're bright red in other areas because it's actually not a good thing. It's like, yes, you want blood flow, and that's what those sort of scans show, but it's also showing the huge amounts of inflammation I had. Whereas the follow-up, toned things down. Well, depression, all these inflammation from TBI, that's what the plant medicine does, right, is tone those things down, help repair those things. So it's actually bringing down the color you see on this scan. So it's not as bright. So to the naked eye or my eye, or to someone that doesn't live and breathe this, that's educated to read these, it could look worse, if that makes sense.
Right.
Oh, there hasn't been improvement. Where I was explaining, like, no, there's actually huge improvement. We're just looking at this one sort of scan that gives you a 3D model of your brain and colors of what is going on. And you would think, oh, you want it brighter because there's more blood flow. Not necessarily in your case, is what I was told, because I had so much inflammation, so much, the depression, all that stuff is inflammation. And that explains the toned down second scan of my brain. So
well, I mean, and the story of CTE is it just gets worse, and you're obviously living proof that it just gets better. And this is the fundamental promise of these psychedelic therapies: is we're not talking about treatments that are residual. We're talking about cures. We're talking about cures. Now, just to put this in the perspective of, let's say you're a ruthless, capitalist, don't give a shit about anybody else, playing in hell's game where you're just trying to make as much fucking money as possible, and that's all that matters. And let's say you wanted to open a gym. All right? So let's say you're in that mindset that the pharmaceutical companies have demonstrated that they have. They're in this mindset. Like, all right, I'm going to open a gym, but I have this one type of workout where you only need to do it once. and you're fit for the rest of your life, and you open a gym down on South Congress and you're like, here, come to this. Well, then at that point, if you need fucking memberships to support your gym, but everybody who walks in is like, haha, fit forever. See you later, Jim. You don't have a good business. And I think that's what we've created. We've created these perverse incentives where the hospitals get more money the more people are sick. The jails get more money the more times people are in jail. The more that people are on residual pharmaceutical treatments forever, the more they get to actually just continue to collect revenue. And so there's not the incentive to develop these like cures, especially because you can't patent iboga or ayahuasca or 5-MeO-DMT. I mean, you can make modifications and do little fancy things and, blessings for those people who are trying to do it because it's still going to, benefit. But fundamentally, these are God's creations, and it's like a kind of absurd to try and patent God's creations. And in that, if you make something new and novel, okay, that makes sense. But these have existed in some cases for thousands of years in traditional practice. But it's just a bad business model. And I think, but that's where the people have to rise up and say, no, we demand cures. And then the government has to actually be the shepherds of the people and say like, no, we're here for the people. We're not here for corporate interests. I don't care how much money you give to us during our campaign. I don't care what your lobbying influence is, what your influence over the media is, all of that. Like, we're here for the people and we're here to cure the people.
Governments can exploit, harm, and damage people. Governments cannot change people and who they are in their fundamental essence. People have the power to change their government, especially when they can be given illumination as to the truth. And with reference to the past 30 years of life in America, most people live lives of survivalism that are paired with methodologies of escapism. There is not engagement in the problems of the day because they've got, frankly, enough problems to solve on their own, putting food on the table and keeping the lights on in the house. So for people who have the ability to engage government systems and can correctly perceive that massive government systems are enthroned upon the subjugation of powerless people, they function to perpetuate the problems that they are intended to solve for no other reason than to expand their own domain of power and resource consumption, and they do so by allowing their corporatist partners, and in some cases masters, to monetize sustained human misery. When that illumination is given, then you are able to motivate the masses to bring the corrective medicine to the power structure that is necessary to make it responsive to the genuine needs of our society. That is why he is in this chair, that is why I am in Texas, and that is why we are going to give everything that we've got to establish a beachhead for God's medicine in the great state of Texas as part of the generational effort to turn this ship around and to make this country what it is supposed to be, as opposed to what it has become.
I mean, I'm just loving this because I'm fucking loving this because I've been, for me, my path hasn't been to go into the actual infrastructure and make those changes at that level. That hasn't been what God has told me to do. God's told me to go deeper, understand me and yourself more and share your wisdom, share your heart, and serve people. And there's been a different mission, but I've been fucking beating the drum for a long time, ever since I went on Rogan's podcast all the way back in. I mean, the big one that really kind of popped it onto the scene was my first discussion of ayahuasca in 2010, when I was talking to Joe about that and the thousands of people who kind of heard that for the first time. But I've been kind of beating this drum like, come on, y'all, and then supporting maps and supporting things. And now it's like, good gracious, it's happening. It's like fucking happening. And it's happening in so many beautiful places. But this aspect, of course, like really going like towards the government. Now this whole vector is now possible. And I'm just so grateful that there are champions like yourselves who are like committed to that. And of course, like anything that I can do to support, like I'm in. It's not my path to go in the government side of things, but nonetheless, like hell yeah, like hell yeah, like this is it. This is what I've been fucking talking about for so many years, y'all. Like, come on, let's go.
I think we've all been put in place to be a different part of this journey, right? Like you said, you look like you've been beating this drum. Like, I'm not a politician. I have no dealings with I stay out of that aspect of it in my own personal life, my personal views, because it's not something I want to be a part of. So a lot of this is outside my wheelhouse. I'm like you, like I do this because it saved my life, saved my family's life. Talk to my wife. That's what I tell anyone who's asked me about it. Like, what is it? Does this really work? Does it? Go talk to my wife. Right? Because we forget how we used to be. Sure. I know what I was, but she has reminded me, like, you don't remember how she used to be, that I wouldn't let you take the kids to soccer practice, right? Because you'd either forget where you were going or you would lose it on somebody or all these different things. And I kind of forgot about that, right? That's behind me, so
it's almost that was a different you.
100%. So I'm a part of this journey to share my story to for those people, the politicians, these people who make the decisions to, hey, it's not just a military thing. It's not just this thing. This is a people thing, right? And then it also, I feel, is my duty to share this with my community and other people. Because I've, the past 3-4 years, it's like, I don't want my business out there. It's hard to talk about these things. But this, some medicine as of late has showed me, like, this has opened up my heart. This is what all that buildup is for. This is what I'm here to do. And I went on a retreat last week and it opened my heart up to come do this work. And like, this is what I'm here for. This is what fills my heart, to be able to open it up and let all that love out, because of what this medicine did for me, did for my family, and what it can do for others. Mm. So that's the openness, and that's my point in this. It's not to stand in front of certain people, which I will, but I think we all have we're all part of the puzzle, right? To make this, and all that's coming together is my point. It's all coming together now to, like, oh, this is, all these things are stacked against us because, like you said, and who's making the money on it? Who's doing these things, right, of the past? Well, let's change that generational trauma, right, of how things were done, and do it for the right, loving reason.
Yeah.
We are living right now within these circumstances a parable. And I came up within faith traditions that are anchored to Judaism and Christianity, going to little old churches at the end of the holler in the mountains with my grandparents, where the preachers probably didn't have a high school diploma and they learned to read out of that Bible. And when I think about what we're all sitting here and discussing, there are 3 stories that come to mind. 2 out of the Old Testament, as I would call it, and 1 of the New. We are all familiar with David, Goliath, the sling, and the stone. Most of us are also probably familiar with Samson collapsing the pillars. And then those who have been raised in the Christian tradition may remember Jesus creating the scourge to chase the money changers out of the temple. If what we manage to achieve here in Texas and then out across the rest of the country in the coming 18 to 24 months can honor the spiritual truths communicated through each of those stories, then we will have done a mighty thing. To be able to be a servant on the pathway is just a fabulous blessing. And worth every difficulty that has come down.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what do you, assuming that you're still connected to the more traditional faith-based systems, there's been a lot of historic pressure. Again, because there's so much beauty in these traditions. Again, I'm in the Hebraic tradition, studying the wisdom of Solomon. I sing my chants, and I'm diving into what hereditarily is my lineage, but also I've found my, teacher, Rebbe Gaffney, and we're going deep in that. And it's allowed me to synthesize what I've known of God from my 25 years of medicine journeys with a reading of the Bible and the sacred texts, the Zohar and the Kabbalist lineage, that all is cohesive and makes sense. So it's allowed me to step back into a more religious, perspective where before it was purely spiritual, but now I'm both spiritual and religious in this kind of fundamental way. And this is my doorway. And I appreciate all the other doorways. I study with Tibetan Buddhists and, Zen masters and samurais and Lakota, and they're all beautiful pathways, Indigenous Australians, and they're all beautiful. But there's, from the way that I see it, a lot of pressure for when religion became a business. And that business required that you needed a middleman. Like if you have God, which is the ultimate quote drug, right? It's like nothing feels better than being filled with God.
Yes.
Right. So, and then you decide, all right, I want to make a business out of this. Well, let me make myself the middleman. And if you're the middleman, you cut off the source with the supplier, because that's how you make money. So they suppressed a lot of the ways that we can access and democratize access to the source. And then they gave themselves a position, a caste, a kind of hierarchy where they could be the middleman, the interlocutors, which is helpful sometimes because we need guides. And so I'm not saying that I'm not like I was before, an angry atheist. I think there's great beauty in all of these traditions, but there's the possibility for transformation. My question and curiosity is, in your experience, like when you go back home, and you talk to the pastors and you talk to, the reverends or whoever else is out there kind of speaking the word of God, how open are they to your story about using these medicines? Or are they still kind of locked in those old historical dogmas that try to suppress the democratized access to the divine?
Based on my individual experience pursuing Ibogaine in Kentucky and then here in Texas, where there are very similar mindsets on issues of both politics and religion. When I describe Ibogaine's impact upon the disconnected individual who finds themselves seeking solace in an addictive substance, whether it's opioids, alcohol, meth, or cocaine, things for which Ibogaine has profound interruptive property and effect. In Kentucky, I said, We've got three attributes that we're working with here. This is a revolutionary opportunity for us because Ibogaine does three things. I would explain the physiology in terms of the way in which it literally, within 48 hours, will resolve physiological substance dependence for 80% of folks who take it but one time. That goes to 97% when they do it with a booster dose. As I said, second thing that it does is it restores an individual's sense of ownership over self. If they have lived lives of compulsion where they are driven by those things that imprison them, on the other side of the Ibogaine experience, they recognize that they have ownership of self and future, and that future will be defined by choices rather than driven by compulsion. And that is fundamental and integral to recreating a viable existence. Then I would say, but finally, and most importantly, and Aubrey, I would say this to the most religiously Bible-believing, thumping person that you could find. I would say, finally, and most importantly, many individuals who have an Ibogaine experience come away with a concrete affirmation and knowledge that they are a spiritual being made in the image of an almighty creator whose essence is pure and unconditional love for them, and that they have a unique and special purpose to achieve with their life. And as I would say those words, I would recognize that this divine emancipation medication is able to deliver a human being what I was given by my papas in childhood. And when they would hear that latter truth, their eyes would open wide and they would say, how quickly can we get it done?
Yeah.
There is an immense cultural opportunity if it can be perceived and properly shepherded within conservative political and religious communities that are desperately seeking the presence and movement of God within their society to know, hey, you don't have to go searching and praying for some miracle to come from the sky. It's growing in the ground. We can congratulate ourselves for being technologically advanced and financially wealthy, but as much as the Enlightenment produced wonderful things by way of empiricism and the scientific method, it came with a downside. Empiricism is materialist and therefore reductionist. And when we view life through a prism that is purely materialist, we're going to miss the most important part of self, and that is our soul. This is about the primacy of the human soul. And when individuals who are uninitiated and uneducated hear about this central truth, they're ready to rock and roll. And that's the message that we have got to get out culturally. Then I'll end it with this. In Kentucky, one of the opportunities that was present to create was genuine racial unity between two groups of folks who are told that they are to be at enmity and to hate each other at all times. And in Kentucky, that means white hillbilly folks like me who live out in the eastern mountains, and then African Americans within the state wherever they exist in any significant number. And in Kentucky's case, that's the west end of Louisville. You take somebody from the west end of Louisville and somebody from East Kentucky who have learned about each other through mass media and put them in a room together, and they are going to look at each other with pure suspicion, if not outright hatred, because of the way in which they have been conditioned to separation and enmity. When we rolled this project out, we did at a time that for the very first occasion in Kentucky history, the death rate among black Kentuckians from opioids was higher than that of whites. Forever, it had been a uniquely white hillbilly problem, but because of the entry of fentanyl into the inner city environment, the death rate among black men in particular exceeded all categories of opioid-related death for both white men and white women. So one of the things that I said was, we have this plant from West Africa. If we are able to bring a medicine from West Africa to heal East Kentucky and the west end of Louisville together, what a fabulous unity opportunity to get two commonly situated populations who are afflicted by the same conditions to recognize that, yes, their afflictions are the same, as are their adversaries, and they need to unite in the kinship of their identity, because that is the only way that they will free each other. And that is a lesson that is to be writ large for this country as we move forward.
The soul knows no race and knows no color.
Amen.
It just knows the rainbow color of God in all of its glory.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. Man, I gotta fucking go. I have to leave, actually. I don't want to leave, but I have to leave. You guys, I mean, as I said, I'm here with you. You count me as a brother and an ally on the way, and let's keep in touch. And I'm here for it. I'm here for all of it. And I know we'll do different things. We all have our different roles to play, as you were saying, but fundamentally, we're all in this together, and there's no one left behind. There's no one outside of the circle. It's like full Musketeers vibe, all for one and one for all. Like, we're in this thing, and it's just, it's an honor to know brothers of the way like you guys, and to know that you're all, knights of the proverbial round table that are here to build the new Camelot, which is the kingdom of heaven that Jesus prophesies would be here. And it's coming, and it's here. It's here for all of us who can see it.
Thank you for the joy and privilege of this conversation here with you two beautiful brothers. It has been fabulous, every second of it.
Absolutely. For people who want to support the cause, where do they go? How do they pitch in, and how do they help?
Number one, get the word out. Anyone with a social network, with social media networks, engage the Texas Ibogaine Initiative. For your listeners who live in Texas, reach out to your state representative and your state senator and say, we need you to vote for House Bill 3717, sponsored and authored by Representative Cody Harris. It's the Texas Ibogaine Initiative, and we need it now. Engage it, message it, Spread the word and ask for folks in Texas to let their voices be heard, because if they're loud enough, the system's going to move where we need it to move.
Beautiful, beautiful. All right. And if there's somebody specifically, you mentioned a couple clinics. There's Beyond, and then there was the first clinic that you went to.
Ambio. So I've Ambio, and then I've also gone to A Mission Within. So I know Ambio, Trevor Miller at Ambio, and Dr. Martine Polanco at A Mission Within are the two that I've, I'm recommending to guys.
And Martine used to run Crossroads down in Mexico. Yeah.
So I know there's great other ones out there, but as we talked earlier, I recommend places I've experienced. And so those are the two great clinics.
What are some of the vets programs that exist now that, like, what was that? Is that Mission Within?
No. So the Veterans Exploring Treatment Solutions. It was started by Marcus Namber Capone.
Yeah.
And there are many others that I'm not quite as familiar with, but Marcus Namber were the ones that took me in.
Sure.
They're sending a lot of mainly special ops guys, but it's, they've got a long line of guys, but there's other military organizations out there. And then that's part of why I started Athletes for Care. It's athletesforcare.org. I want to be that avenue, and with the help of Marcus Namber and what they've set up, send our guys that need it, right? Because the thought that every athlete is this rich, multi-million-dollar athlete is also not true. Kind of some of the stigma as there is with anything, so there are guys that, my organization, we're working to, raise money and send guys that need it for, all the same reasons that everybody else does.
Yeah.
The Beyond Clinic in Cancun also has a specialized veteran program called Beyond Service that was rolled out, and they had their first cohort go through in January. We ran out of time to talk about it. I know you said you had 2 additional Ibogaine journeys. Every psychedelic experience I have had, including the one that I have described here with you this afternoon, was preparatory for what I experienced at Beyond in December of 2024. And if we have a chance for a separate conversation, that's a journey that I would love to be able to share because of its profundity.
Yeah.
Everything.
I didn't even get to tell you my journeys with the Boga. We got more stories to tell.
Let's
do this again.
Yes, sir.
Let's do this again. This is just part 1. Yeah, it's part 1. Well, thank you guys. I appreciate you. And we love you so much. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning into this video. Make sure you hit subscribe. Follow me at Aubrey Marcus. Check out the Aubrey Marcus podcast, available everywhere. And leave a comment. Let me know if this video resonated or what else you would like to hear from me in the future. Thank you so much.